Pain reveals what love hides. In the moment when life begins, betrayal cuts deepest. The delivery room should have been a sanctuary of joy. For Jenna Whitaker, it became the stage for the ultimate betrayal. While she endured the pains of labor, bringing the heir to the expansive Whitaker holdings into the world, her husband sent a lawyer, not with flowers, but with divorce papers. It was a cold, calculated strike designed to break her at her most vulnerable. The fairy tale was a lie. She was being discarded. But her husband and his powerful family made one fatal miscalculation. They never knew about her grandfather's secret. The pain was a white-hot tide pulling Jenna under, then releasing her just long enough to gasp for air before the next wave crashed. Each contraction was a brutal clenching of her entire being, a primal, all-consuming force that had become her whole world. The sterile beige walls of the birthing suite at Westbridge Memorial Hospital seemed to pulse with her agony. Through the haze of it all, she clung to one thought, one image, Ethan's face. Ethan, her husband, the man whose smile had first captivated her at a non-profit fundraiser, a flash of genuine warmth in a room of practiced pleasantries. Ethan Whitaker of Whitaker Holdings, a name synonymous with generational wealth and the kind of influence that shaped city skylines and elite institutions. He was supposed to be here, holding her hand, his deep voice a soothing anchor in the storm of pain. He'd called an hour ago, his voice strained, apologetic. "Darling, I'm so sorry. An emergency board meeting. The Levington merger is on the verge of collapsing. I have to be here. I'll be there the second it's over. I promise." Disappointment had been a sharp sting, but she'd pushed it down. This was Ethan. His work was demanding, a beast that always needed feeding. She understood. She'd always been the understanding wife. "It's okay, my love," she'd whispered through a contraction, her voice tight. "Just hurry, he's coming." "I will," he'd sworn. "I love you, Jenna. I love you too." Now another wave crested. She squeezed the hand of the nurse, a kind woman named Lila, her knuckles white. "Breathe, honey. You're doing great," Lila encouraged, her voice a calm island in the tempest. Just as the contraction subsided, leaving Jenna trembling and slick with sweat, there was a sharp, professional rap on the door. It wasn't Ethan. She knew his knock, the casual, confident rhythm of it. This was different. A man in a perfectly tailored, mercilessly expensive suit stepped in. He had the kind of face that was entirely forgettable, designed to blend in, to be unnoticed. He carried a sleek leather briefcase and exuded an aura of detached efficiency that felt like a blast of Arctic air in the heated intimacy of the room. "Mrs. Whitaker?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "Sir, this is a private delivery room. You can't be in here." Lila immediately stepped forward, her body a protective shield. The man paid her no mind, his gaze fixed on Jenna, who was propped up against a mountain of pillows, her body aching and exposed. "I am Carter Lorne from the legal firm of Wexley and Hunt. I have a delivery for Mrs. Whitaker, from Mr. Ethan Whitaker." Jenna's heart, which had been pounding in a frantic rhythm of pain, seemed to stutter and stop. Wexley and Hunt, Ethan's lawyers. Why would they be sending someone here now? "A delivery?" she asked, her voice raspy. Maybe it was a surprise, a ridiculous over-the-top gift that Ethan had arranged to apologize for his absence. A deed to a new house, perhaps. It was the kind of grand, slightly misguided gesture he was known for. Mr. Lorne stepped closer to the bed, placing his briefcase on the visitor's chair. He opened it with a series of chillingly precise clicks. He didn't pull out a velvet box or a fancy envelope. He pulled out a thick stack of papers bound in a stark blue legal cover. He placed it on the rolling table over her bed, next to a half-empty cup of ice chips. "These require your signature, Mrs. Whitaker," he said, his tone as clinical as a surgeon's. Jenna stared at the document. The bold letters on the top seemed to blur and sharpen, mocking her. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words didn't compute. It was like reading a foreign language she'd never seen before. Dissolution of marriage. Divorce. I don't understand," she stammered, looking from the papers to the lawyer's impassive face. "This is a mistake. There's a mistake." Mr. Lorne's expression didn't flicker. "There is no mistake, Mrs. Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker was quite clear in his instructions. He requests you sign these as soon as possible to ensure a swift and uncomplicated process." He tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the signature line. He has been most generous in the settlement agreement, considering the brevity of your marriage. The brevity of her marriage. 18 months. A whirlwind romance. A society wedding that had been the talk of Charleston. A year and a half of what she had believed was love. Of building a life. Of creating the baby that was currently fighting its way into the world. Another contraction began to build. A low, ominous rumble. But this time it was different. It was intertwined with a new kind of pain. A psychic agony so sharp and blinding it threatened to tear her apart more surely than the physical act of childbirth. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, her eyes wide with a dawning, shattering horror. "No, he wouldn't. Not now. Not like this." The lawyer simply slid a pen from his breast pocket and placed it neatly beside the papers. "My instructions are to wait for the signature." Lila, the nurse, finally found her voice, her tone laced with outrage. "Get out. Get out of here right now or I'm calling security." Mr. Lorne gave a slight, almost imperceptible shrug. "As you wish. I will wait outside." "But Mrs. Whitaker," he said, his gaze locking with hers, a flicker of something cold and final in his eyes, "delaying this will not change the outcome. It will only make it more public. Mr. Whitaker wishes to handle this with discretion. I suggest you do the same." He turned and walked out, closing the door with a soft final click. The room was silent, save for Jenna's ragged, frantic breaths. The blue-back document sat on the table like a poisonous snake. Generous. Discretion. The words echoed in her mind, a cruel litany of betrayal. The emergency board meeting, the Levington deal. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed, brutally executed lie. He wasn't in a meeting. He was somewhere else, with someone else. While she was here, alone, in the most vulnerable moment of her life, being served divorce papers. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a breakup. It was an act of profound psychological violence. It was designed to break her. The full force of the next contraction hit her and a scream tore from her throat. But it wasn't just a scream of physical pain anymore. It was a raw, guttural cry of a heart being ripped in two, of a life being demolished, of a love she now realized had been a complete and utter fraud. Her fairy tale hadn't just ended, it had exploded, leaving nothing but toxic, radioactive dust in its wake. And in that moment, as the pain threatened to swallow her whole, a new feeling began to smolder in the ashes of her heart: rage. The hours that followed were a blur of agony, a disorienting hellscape, where the pain of her body and the pain of her soul merged into one unbearable symphony. The clinical beeps of the monitors were the soundtrack to her world collapsing. Every push was fueled by a desperate primal fury. She wasn't just birthing a baby anymore. She was expelling the poison, the lies, the ghost of the man she thought she loved, and then, after an eternity, it was over. A new sound cut through the fog, a raw, powerful wail. Her son. They placed him on her chest, a tiny, squirming, red-faced creature with a thatch of dark hair, just like Ethan's. For a moment, seeing that hair was like a fresh stab to the heart. But then he opened his eyes, and they were her eyes. Her grandfather's eyes. A deep, soulful blue. In that instant, the world tilted back on its axis. The betrayal, the lawyer, the papers, they all faded to a dull roar. There was only this new, fierce, all-encompassing love. A love that was real. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her voice cracking, tears streaming down her face and mingling with the sweat on her brow. "It's you and me now." She named him Elijah, after her grandfather, Elijah Monroe. Not Elijah Whitaker. He would carry her name, her legacy. Not the tainted name of the man who had tried to erase them both on the day of his birth. The Whitaker frost descended quickly. A perfunctory, ostentatiously large flower arrangement arrived from her mother-in-law, Virginia Whitaker, with a card that read, "Congratulations on the new arrival. We wish you both well." Not, "We can't wait to meet our grandson." Not, "We love you." It was a corporate sign-off, a severance package in floral form. There were no calls, no visits. The silence was as calculated and cruel as the arrival of the lawyer. She had been excised from the family narrative with surgical precision. The day after the birth, her loyal friend, Camille Foster, burst into the room, her face a storm of fury and concern. Camille, a fiery redhead who ran a successful art gallery, had been Jenna's friend since college, her detector always finely tuned. "I came as soon as I heard," Camille said, her voice low and simmering as she enveloped Jenna in a careful hug. She looked at the sleeping baby in the bassinet with wonder. Then her eyes fell on the blue document still sitting on the side table. Her face hardened. That bastard. I swear to God, Jenna, I will key his Aston Martin from bumper to bumper. Jenna managed a weak, watery smile. Get in line. Camille pulled up a chair, her energy a welcome warmth in the cold room. What are you going to do? I don't know, Jenna admitted, her gaze drifting to her son. An hour ago, I thought I was going to fall apart, but then I looked at him, and I knew I couldn't. She looked away toward the window, where the gray Charleston skyline stood indifferent. Her mind drifted back, not to Ethan, but to her grandfather. Elijah Monroe had been a titan in his own right, a self-made man who had built a construction and materials empire from the ground up. He was old school, a man of handshakes and integrity with a shrewd eye for character that had rarely failed him. When Whitaker Holdings had acquired his company, Monroe Materials, a decade ago, it wasn't because he was failing. It was a strategic merger that made them all exponentially wealthier. But he had never fully trusted the Whitakers, especially Ethan's father, a man he once called a silk shirt with nothing inside. He had adored Jenna. When she announced her engagement to Ethan, he had been the only one who hadn't offered immediate, gushing congratulations. He'd taken her to lunch at his favorite old steakhouse, a place with dark wood and worn leather booths. He's charming, I'll give him that, Elijah had said, swirling the ice in his whiskey glass. The Whitakers have always been charming. It's their primary currency. You don't like him, Grandpa? Jenna had asked, her heart sinking. It's not about liking him, sweetheart. It's about seeing him. You see a prince. I see a man who has never wanted for anything in his life. Men like that. They can be careless. They break things without even realizing it, because they know they can always buy a new one. He had reached across the table and covered her hand with his own, his skin weathered and strong. I want you to be happy, but I also want you to be protected. That night, Jenna lay awake long after Ethan had fallen asleep beside her. The words "they break things" looped in her mind, soft but insistent. She stared at the ceiling, trying to push away the uneasy shadow her grandfather had cast. She didn't want to believe it. Not about Ethan. Not about the man who had made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. But there it was, a whisper at the back of her thoughts, a tiny fissure in the perfect image she had painted. That night, after dinner, Jenna had returned home, still replaying her grandfather's words. She wanted to brush them off as overprotective musings, but a small voice in her gut wouldn't quiet down. A week later, while Ethan was in the shower, she'd seen a message flash across his phone. Just a name, S, and a vague text that said, "Last night was a mistake." Her heart had frozen for half a second. She wasn't the snooping type, but the unease had clung to her. She stood there for several moments, staring at the message, her hands trembling. A war waged inside her, logic battling instinct, hope fighting with the growing dread. She wanted to believe there was an explanation. She needed to believe it. She could have asked him, could have demanded the truth. But then he came out of the bathroom, towel-draped, smiling and warm, and wrapped his arms around her like nothing was wrong. Jenna had looked up into his eyes, searching for something, anything. But she found herself smiling back, convincing herself it was harmless, that she was overthinking it. After all, people made mistakes. He loved her. She wanted to believe that more than anything. A week before the wedding, he had given her a gift, not jewelry or art, but a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with his personal wax signet. "Don't open this," he had instructed, his blue eyes serious. "Put it somewhere safe. My lawyer, Mr. Arthur Harrison, has the other copy. I hope you never need it. I hope your prince is everything you believe him to be, Bill. But if the day ever comes when you see the real man you married, the man I worry he might be, you open this. Promise me." She had promised, touched, but also a little confused. She tucked the envelope into a safe deposit box and, in the bliss of her new marriage, had forgotten all about it. Until now. "Camille," Jenna said, her voice suddenly clear and strong. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to go to my bank. In the safe deposit box, there's a large cream envelope with a wax seal. I need you to bring it to me. And I need you to find a man named Arthur Harrison. He was my grandfather's lawyer. Tell him it's time." Camille's eyes widened. She recognized the shift in her friend's tone. The victim was gone. The warrior was emerging. "Consider it done," she said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "Oh, I have a feeling this is about to get very, very interesting." As Camille left, Jenna looked back at her son, Elijah. The Whitakers thought they were dealing with a naive, heartbroken girl they could discard with a check. They thought they had all the power. But they had forgotten about her grandfather. They had forgotten where a significant portion of their own company's foundation had come from. And they had no idea that the ghost of Elijah Monroe had left his granddaughter one final devastating weapon. He had warned her about the man who breaks things. And now, she was ready to show them what it felt like to be broken. The penthouse apartment overlooking Charleston Harbor was a monument to modern, sterile wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a glittering panorama of the water and city skyline, a kingdom spread at their feet. The air was thick with the scent of expensive champagne and the self-satisfied perfume of victory. Ethan Whitaker swirled the Dom Perignon in his crystal flute, a smug smile playing on his handsome face. He watched Sabrina Vale as she paced before the window, a panther in a silk dress, her phone pressed to her ear. She was magnificent, he thought, all sharp angles and calculated ambition. She was nothing like Jenna. Jenna was soft, all gentle curves and trusting eyes. She was a beautiful, comforting space. But Sabrina was a conquest. She was a reflection of his own ruthless drive. "Yes, Carter, I understand," Sabrina said into the phone, her voice a blade of polished steel. She refused to sign. "Crying, you said?" "Predictable. Yes, make sure the press packet is ready." The narrative is a simple one. An amicable split. Two people who wanted different things. We wish her well. She wishes us well. Clean. No fault. Got it. She ended the call and turned to Ethan, her red lips curling into a triumphant smile. "The little mouse is in her cage, weeping as expected. Your lawyer said the nurse threw him out. So dramatic." Ethan chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "She'll sign. What choice does she have? She's emotional. She'll see the settlement offer and realize it's the best deal she's ever going to get. Her family has comfortable money, but this is generational wealth. She'd be a fool to fight it." "She's a fool in any case," Sabrina scoffed, gliding over to the bar to refill her glass. "Marrying you, thinking she was anything more than a placeholder. A pretty, pedigreed broodmare to pop out the requisite heir." She turned to face him, her eyes glittering with a cold fire. "Did you tell her about me?" "Of course not," Ethan said, walking over to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He breathed in her scent, a heady mix of Chanel No. 5 and pure, unadulterated ambition. "The official story is that we grew apart. The pressures of my work, her desire for a quiet life, it's all very civilized. The press will eat it up." He didn't mention the sleepless nights Jenna had spent waiting for him, or the soft, hopeful notes she used to leave in his briefcase. None of it mattered now. She had played her part. And now, the curtain was closing. Their affair had been going on for over a year, almost since the beginning of his marriage. Sabrina Vale wasn't just a mistress, she was his co-conspirator. As the head of mergers and acquisitions at Wexley and Hunt, the very law firm the Whitakers kept on retainer, she had intimate knowledge of his family's finances and a ruthless mind for strategy. She was the one who had planned the timing of the divorce. "The timing is perfect," she had explained weeks ago in this very apartment. "The prenup is ironclad, but a messy divorce with a newborn could generate public sympathy for her. Sympathy can lead to judges making emotional decisions. But if we strike while she's at her weakest, most vulnerable point, in labor, overwhelmed, hormonal, she won't have the strength to fight. She'll be a wounded animal. She'll crawl away and take the settlement. We control the narrative from the very first second." It was brutal. It was clinical. It was warfare disguised as strategy. And Ethan had found it thrilling. Every step had felt like a masterstroke. Watching Jenna fall apart would be the final proof that he had outmaneuvered her completely. Sabrina now ran a hand down his chest, her nails tracing the lapel of his suit. "And the child?" "The child will be taken care of. A generous trust fund. Supervised visits when he's older. If she behaves, he's a Whitaker. He'll be provided for. But he won't be the heir to the throne. Our children will be." That was the crux of the plan. Sabrina didn't just want to be his wife. She wanted to be the matriarch of a new Whitaker dynasty. Her children, their children, would inherit the empire. Jenna's son would be a footnote, a forgotten branch on the family tree, bought off and kept at a comfortable distance. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was his mother, Virginia. He put it on speaker. "Ethan, darling," Virginia's clipped, aristocratic voice filled the room. "I trust everything is proceeding as planned?" "Perfectly, Mother. Carter Lauren delivered the papers an hour ago. Her reaction, exactly as expected. Tears and hysterics," Ethan said with a sigh, as if bored by the predictability of it all. "Good," Virginia said, her voice dripping with ice. "It is vital we manage this. The last thing we need is a messy public spectacle. This girl, she was a mistake from the start, too earnest. The Monroe family has respectable origins, but they lack the killer instinct. They're builders, not rulers." Sabrina smirked, raising her glass in a silent toast. "I've already spoken to our people at the Chronicle and the Observer," Virginia continued. "They're prepared for our statement tomorrow. We'll announce the separation, citing irreconcilable differences. We'll also announce your new philanthropic initiative, the Whitaker Children's Foundation. It will soften the image." "Brilliant, Mother," Ethan said. He looked at Sabrina. "Sabrina and I are hosting a small press conference tomorrow afternoon at the office to present a united front." There was a slight pause on the line. "Sabrina will be there so soon. It's better this way," she interjected, her voice smooth as silk. "Show strength, a seamless transition, no hint of scandal. Ethan and I have been working closely on the Levington acquisition. It's only natural we appear together. It's business." Virginia considered this. She was a pragmatist above all else. "Very well, but be careful. The Levingtons value family and stability. We cannot afford to look like reckless libertines." "We'll be the picture of stability," Ethan assured her. After the call ended, Sabrina turned to him, her expression serious. "She'll never be fully on my side, you know, your mother. To her, I'm just another piece of ambitious trash who got her claws into her son." "She'll come around," Ethan said, pulling her close. "When our son is born, when she sees the new, stronger Whitaker line we're creating, she'll understand. We're culling the herd, Sabrina, getting rid of the weak link. That's how dynasties survive. This is an act of preservation." He kissed her, a hard, possessive kiss that was more about ownership than affection. They were two predators who had found each other, who saw the world as a carcass to be devoured. They were celebrating their kill, confident their prey was bleeding out, helpless and alone in a hospital room across town. They toasted to their future, to the empire they would command. Utterly oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon, a storm unleashed by a ghost's warning and a mother's love. They believed they had thought of everything, anticipated every move, but they had built their entire plan on one fundamentally flawed assumption, that Jenna Monroe Whitaker was weak. The hospital room had been transformed into a command center. The cloying scent of Virginia Whitaker's funereal lilies had been replaced by the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Camille had set up a laptop on the rolling table, and the blue-backed divorce petition was now buried under a pile of far more important documents. In the center of it all was Arthur Harrison, a man who seemed to have been carved from granite and tweed. He was in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair and the same piercing blue eyes as his late client, Elijah Monroe. He exuded an aura of quiet, unshakable competence. He had looked at the newborn baby sleeping in the bassinet with a soft, grandfatherly smile before turning his full, undivided attention to the business at hand. He held the two cream-colored envelopes, Jenna's with its broken seal, and his own identical copy. A single page of thick, watermarked paper lay between them on the table. It wasn't a will in the traditional sense. It was a declaration of trust. "Your grandfather was one of the shrewdest men I have ever known," Mr. Harrison said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "He saw Ethan Whitaker for exactly what he was. A peacock, all feathers and no substance." He tapped the paper. "When Monroe Materials merged with Whitaker Holdings, your grandfather didn't take a simple cash buyout or a standard stock swap. He was smarter than that. He converted his majority ownership, which constituted at the time 40% of the newly merged entity's core manufacturing assets, into a private trust, the EM Legacy Trust." Jenna listened, her mind racing, feeding off the lawyer's calm energy. She felt a connection to her grandfather so strong, it was as if he were in the room with them. "For the past decade," Mr. Harrison continued, "the trust has been managed by me. The beneficiary of its profits has been the Whitaker Corporation itself, under the condition that they maintain the Monroe manufacturing plants and their employees. It was, for all intents and purposes, a silent, integrated part of their portfolio. They benefited from it, but they never controlled it. Your father-in-law and Ethan believe the trust is a permanent fixture, an unbreakable part of the corporate structure. They believe wrong, Camille breathed, leaning forward, her eyes wide. They believe wrong, Mr. Harrison confirmed with a thin, grim smile. Elijah put in one very specific, very personal clause. He called it the character clause. He then read from the document, "In the event that my granddaughter Jenna Monroe is legally married to Ethan Whitaker, the control of the EM Legacy Trust shall remain with the appointed trustee. However, should said marriage be dissolved for any reason, full and irrevocable control of the EM Legacy Trust and all its assets shall immediately pass to my granddaughter Jenna Monroe, provided that the dissolution of the marriage was initiated by Ethan Whitaker, under circumstances that demonstrate a clear and malicious breach of the marital contract, including but not limited to infidelity, abandonment, or profound cruelty." Jenna's breath hitched. Profound cruelty. Sending divorce papers to a woman in labor. It was as if her grandfather had seen this exact moment, this exact betrayal from a decade away. "They served you papers while you were in labor," Mr. Harrison stated, his voice ringing with cold fury. "They had a lawyer invade the sanctity of a delivery room. They've already provided us with all the proof we need to invoke the clause. The moment you sign those papers, Jenna, you don't just become a divorcee with a settlement. You become the majority stakeholder in their entire manufacturing division." Jenna looked from the lawyer's determined face to her sleeping son. The Whitaker empire was built on two pillars: finance and manufacturing. The Monroe division was the bedrock of their physical assets, the factories, the supply chains, the real, tangible part of their company. Without it, their stock would be decimated. "They don't know," Jenna whispered, a sense of dizzying, terrifying power flowing through her. "They have no idea this exists." "None whatsoever," Mr. Harrison said. "The trust documents are sealed. They think they're just cutting you loose. In reality, they're handing you the knife to gut their entire company." A plan began to form in her mind, sharp and clear. This wasn't just about money or revenge. This was about justice. It was for her son, Elijah, to protect his legacy from the family that had tried to cast him aside. And it was for her grandfather to honor his foresight and his faith in her. "Camille," Jenna said, her voice steady, "I need you to call the PR firm I used for the Children's Literacy Gala last year. The best. Tell them I need a full press setup, microphones, cameras, a live feed. I don't want to release a statement. I want to make one." "Where?" Camille asked, already typing on her phone. Jenna's gaze fell on the window. She could have them set it up in a hotel ballroom, a lawyer's office. But that wasn't right. This wasn't a corporate takeover. This was personal. This was about a mother and her child. "Here," Jenna said, "on the steps of the hospital when I'm discharged tomorrow." Mr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold move. It will be a circus." "That's the point," Jenna replied, a core of steel hardening within her. "Ethan and Sabrina want to control the narrative in a sterile corporate press conference. They want to talk about amicable splits in different paths. They want to erase me. I'm not going to let them. The world isn't going to see a broken, weeping victim. They're going to see a mother. They're going to see me holding my son. And they are going to hear the truth." She looked at Camille. "And find out exactly when Ethan's press conference is scheduled. I want mine to start 15 minutes later." Camille grinned, a feral, delighted expression on her face. "You want to hijack their broadcast? I want to burn it to the ground," Jenna said. She then turned to Mr. Harrison. "Can you have everything legally prepared by tomorrow?" "My dear," the old lawyer said, his eyes twinkling with a warrior's light, "I have been waiting for this day for 10 years. It will be my distinct pleasure." As the two of them worked, coordinating the legal and public relations assault, Jenna picked up her son. She held him close, his tiny body warm against hers. He was so small, so innocent. Ethan and Sabrina had seen him as a pawn to be discarded. They didn't know they had just created their own executioner. She would not be the weak link. She would be the wrecking ball, and she would swing with the force of a betrayed wife. a protective mother, and the righteous fury of Elijah Monroe himself. The Whitaker Corporation boardroom was a symphony of polished mahogany, black leather, and brushed steel. It was a room designed to project power, a cathedral of capitalism where fortunes were made and destroyed. At the head of the long table, a podium had been set up bearing the company's stylized W logo. A bank of television cameras and a crowd of reporters from every major financial and news outlet filled the space, their chatter a low hum of anticipation. Ethan Whitaker stood just off to the side, adjusting his silk tie. He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was his stage. He looked over at Sabrina, who stood beside him, a vision of corporate elegance in a navy blue dress. She gave him a subtle, encouraging nod. They were a power couple, ready for their debut. His mother, Virginia, sat in the front row, her posture ramrod straight, her expression a carefully neutral mask. She had insisted on being there to project an image of family unity, even in dissolution. 5 minutes, Mr. Whitaker, a harried PR aide whispered. Ethan took a deep breath. He had gone over the statement a dozen times. It was perfect, empathetic, yet firm. It expressed regret, but also forward-looking optimism. It would paint him as a magnanimous, if heartbroken, man of duty. At precisely 2 p.m., he and Sabrina walked to the podium. The camera flashes erupted, a storm of silent lightning. "Good afternoon," Ethan began, his voice smooth and confident, resonating with practiced sincerity. "Thank you all for coming. I've asked you here today to address some personal news and to quell the speculation that has unfortunately begun to circulate." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room, making eye contact with a few of the more prominent journalists. "As some of you know, my wife Jenna and I have been separated for some time. It is with a heavy heart that I am announcing we have mutually and amicably decided to end our marriage." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was faster than anyone had expected. "Jenna is a wonderful woman," he continued, his voice tinged with a perfect note of sadness. "And she has just given me the most precious gift a man could ask for, a beautiful, healthy son. I will, of course, be providing for them both to ensure they have everything they could ever need. However, we have come to realize that we want different things from life. Our paths have diverged. This decision was not made lightly, but it was made with love and respect for each other." It was a masterclass in spin. He was the noble husband, the loving new father, forced to make a difficult choice. Sabrina stepped slightly forward, a silent signal of the new era. On a corporate note, Ethan said, his tone shifting to one of command, "I want to assure our shareholders and partners that this is a private matter that will have no bearing on the strength and stability of Whitaker Corporation." Ethan said, his tone steady, polished. "In fact, we are entering a new phase of dynamic growth spearheaded by our head of M&A, Sabrina Vale." He placed a hand briefly on her arm. "Our work on the Levington acquisition is proceeding, and we are more focused than ever on our future." A reporter from the Wall Street Journal raised her hand. "Mr. Whitaker, your wife just gave birth yesterday. Can you comment on the timing of this announcement?" Ethan was prepared for this. "We felt it was better to be transparent and address this head-on to avoid a prolonged period of rumor and speculation, which would be unfair to everyone, especially Jenna. We are handling this with the utmost discretion and privacy. Now, I won't be taking any further questions on this personal matter." It was then that the first phone buzzed, then another. A reporter in the front row looked down at his screen, his eyes widening. He nudged his cameraman, pointing frantically toward the large television monitor on the wall behind the podium, which had been showing a live feed of Ethan. The feed suddenly split. On one side was Ethan Whitaker, looking polished and in control. On the other was a new, raw, and infinitely more compelling image. It was Jenna. She was standing on the steps of Charleston General Hospital. She looked pale, exhausted, and thinner than anyone had seen her before. She wasn't wearing a power suit, but a simple, elegant gray coat over a plain black dress. In her arms, wrapped in a soft white blanket, she held her newborn son. Her fiery friend Camille Blake stood protectively beside her, and next to her was the formidable, granite-faced figure of Arthur Harrison. A forest of microphones was clustered in front of them. The wind whipped a few strands of her hair across her face, but her expression was one of absolute, unshakable resolve. In the Whitaker boardroom, a hush fell. Every eye, including Ethan's, Sabrina's, and Virginia's, was now glued to the screen. Ethan's perfectly orchestrated press conference had just been spectacularly hijacked. "My name is Jenna Monroe," she began, her voice quiet but carried clearly by the microphones. It wasn't the broken, weeping voice Ethan had imagined. It was clear and steady, laced with a mother's iron will. "Yesterday, I gave birth to my son, Elijah Monroe." She emphasized her own surname, a deliberate and powerful choice that did not go unnoticed. "It was the most beautiful and the most painful day of my life," she continued, her gaze direct and unflinching at the camera. "Beautiful because he came into the world." She looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, her expression softening, with a love so fierce it was almost palpable. "Painful because while I was in labor, my husband, Ethan Whitaker, sent a lawyer to my hospital bed to serve me with these." With her free hand, she reached out. Camille handed her the blue-backed legal document. Jenna held it up for all the cameras to see. The words "petition for dissolution of marriage" were unmistakable, even on screen. A collective gasp went through the boardroom. The reporters there began talking at once, a chaotic babble of shock and excitement. Ethan's face had gone ashen. Sabrina's mask of cool composure had cracked, her eyes wide with disbelief and fury. Virginia looked like she had seen a ghost. "My husband," Jenna continued, her voice gaining strength, "is currently in his boardroom telling you that our split is amicable, that it was a mutual decision. This is a lie." She paused, her fingers tightening just slightly around her son's blanket. Her lips trembled, but her voice held. This wasn't just a press statement. It was a reckoning. She looked down at the papers in her hand. "He is also offering me a generous settlement to go away quietly, to be erased. He asked for my signature on these papers to ensure a swift, uncomplicated process." She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. Then she looked directly into the camera. A warrior queen addressing the world. "And I am going to give him what he wants." Camille produced a pen in front of the entire world, with the city sirens wailing in the background. Jenna Monroe Whitaker leaned the divorce petition against a hospital binder held by Camille and signed her name with a firm, deliberate flourish. In the boardroom, Ethan felt a momentary, idiotic surge of relief. She'd signed. It was over. But Jenna wasn't finished. She handed the signed papers and the pen back to Camille. "I have signed these papers," she declared, her voice ringing out. "Our marriage is, for all intents and purposes, over. And in doing so, I have fulfilled the final condition of a legal instrument put in place 10 years ago by my grandfather, Elijah Monroe." She nodded to Mr. Harrison. The old lawyer stepped forward to the microphones, his expression grim. "I am Arthur Harrison, legal counsel for the late Elijah Monroe and trustee of the EM Legacy Trust," he announced. As of the moment Mrs. Whitaker signed those divorce papers, per the character clause of the trust established upon the merger of Monroe Materials and Whitaker Holdings, full and irrevocable control of 100% of the trust's assets has now passed to Jenna Monroe. He let that sink in. The financial reporters in Ethan's boardroom knew exactly what that meant. Their phones were already out, fingers flying across screens. On the ticker at the bottom of the television monitor, the Whitaker Corporation stock symbol WTC was suddenly flanked by a downward-pointing red arrow. "What assets exactly?" a reporter yelled at Mr. Harrison. Mr. Harrison allowed himself a small, cold smile. "The EM Legacy Trust holds the entirety of what was formerly Monroe Materials. This includes the 4 primary manufacturing plants, all associated supply chain contracts, and the patents for their proprietary composite materials. In short, as of 10 minutes ago, Miss Doc Monroe is now the owner of the entire manufacturing and materials division of Whitaker Corporation." Chaos erupted in the boardroom. The reporters forgot all about Ethan and Sabrina. They were shouting into their phones, scrambling to get the story out. The stock ticker on the screen was no longer just pointing down. It was plummeting. WTC 75, WTC 940, WTC 114.20. Ethan stared, his mouth agape. His face was a mask of utter horror. It couldn't be real. The trust was a fixture, a passive entity. It couldn't be touched. But it had been the foundation of his family's empire. The real, tangible part had just been ripped out from under him. He looked at Sabrina. Her face was a terrifying mixture of rage and panic. her own carefully laid plans. Her dynasty had just been annihilated. She wasn't marrying the king of an empire. She had just shackled herself to the captain of a sinking ship. He then looked at his mother. Virginia's face was frozen in a silent scream. She understood better than anyone. They hadn't just lost money, they had lost everything. The power, the prestige, the legacy. Gutted in public by the earnest girl she had so easily dismissed. On the screen, Jenna pulled the blanket tighter around her son. She had one final thing to say. Ethan Whitaker and his family believe that people, like companies, can be acquired and liquidated, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. They were wrong. My son and I are not a liability to be written off. We are the legacy, and we will not be erased. She turned, and with Camille and Mr. Harrison flanking her like a royal guard, she walked back into the hospital, leaving a mushroom cloud of financial and social ruin in her wake. The cameras followed her until she was gone, then swung back to the stunned reporters, all fighting to tell the story of the day a woman scorned didn't just get mad. She got everything. The fallout was not a storm. It was a nuclear winter. The Whitaker Corporation stock, which had begun to plummet during Jenna's press conference, went into a free fall. Trading was halted twice before the closing bell, but the damage was done. By the end of the day, nearly 60% of the company's market value had been wiped out. WTC, once a titan of the Dow Jones, was now a penny stock in the making. The story was everywhere. A viral sensation that transcended the financial pages and exploded into the mainstream. It was a story of biblical proportions. David versus Goliath. Except David was a new mother in a gray coat, and Goliath was a corporate raider, taken down by his own hubris. The narrative Ethan and Sabrina had tried to control had been rewritten by Jenna in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. They weren't the puppet masters. They were the punchline. For Ethan, the hours after the press conference were a surreal nightmare. His phone rang incessantly with calls from furious board members, panicked investors, and former allies now scrambling to distance themselves from the radioactive stink of his name. The Levington family, whose deal had been the pretext for his betrayal, issued a curt public statement announcing they were indefinitely postponing their acquisition talks, citing concerns over instability and a lack of ethical leadership at Whitaker Corp. It was a public shiv, twisted with relish. He and Sabrina had retreated to his penthouse, the scene of their triumphant celebration just a day earlier. Now it felt like a tomb. The champagne flutes were still on the bar, mocking them. "You have to fix this, Ethan," Sabrina shrieked, her voice stripped of its silky composure, now raw and ragged. She was pacing like a caged animal, her phone clutched in her hand as she watched her own carefully constructed future dissolve. "Call her. Offer her anything. We'll buy her out." "With what money?" Ethan yelled back, gesturing wildly at the television, where a financial news anchor was gleefully dissecting their corporate evisceration. "She owns the company's guts. The banks are calling in our loans. Our credit lines have been frozen. We have nothing to offer her, because she already took it all." "This is your fault," Sabrina accused, whirling on him, her eyes blazing with hate. "You and your stupid, arrogant family. You underestimated her, the little mouse you called her." "I underestimated her?" Ethan shot back, the accusation tasting like ash in his mouth. "You planned the timing. You said to hit her when she was weak." Their partnership, built on a shared lust for power, crumbled instantly without it. They turned on each other with the savage ferocity of starving wolves, their recriminations and insults echoing through the vast, empty apartment. This wasn't a team anymore. It was two rats fighting over the last scrap on a sinking ship. Virginia Whitaker's fate was quieter, but no less devastating. The old money society she had ruled with an iron fist closed its ranks to her. Luncheon invitations ceased. Her calls to the wives of other board members went to voicemail. She was a pariah. The Whitaker name, once a key to every door in Charleston, was now a mark of shame. She had been dethroned not by a rival matriarch, but by the girl she had deemed too soft, the builder's granddaughter. Meanwhile, in a quiet suite at the Carril Hotel, which Mr. Harrison had secured for her and the baby, Jenna was building a new world. Though the room was filled with strategy sessions and financial briefings, the emotional weight hadn't lifted. At night, after the analysts left and Camille finally slept on the adjacent couch, Jenna would sit alone by the window with Elijah nestled on her chest, whispering promises into the quiet, promises of protection, of a future rewritten. There were tears, not of sadness, but of release. She hadn't just survived. She had transformed. The room was filled not with panicked calls, but with quiet, focused work. Financial analysts loyal to Mr. Harrison were briefing her. Lawyers were drafting documents. Camille was fielding calls, acting as a fierce and effective gatekeeper. Jenna sat in an armchair by the window, rocking Elijah, who was sleeping peacefully against her shoulder, oblivious to the corporate empire that now rested on his tiny shoulders. She wasn't euphoric or triumphant. She felt a profound and weary sense of justice. She had not sought this war, but she had been determined to win it. 2 days later, an emergency meeting of what was left of the Whitaker Corporation board was convened. It was a short meeting. Ethan, stripped of his power and authority, was voted out as CEO and removed from the board in a unanimous decision. He was given a severance package dictated by the company's bylaws, a pittance compared to the fortune he had lost. His replacement was announced an hour later. Acting on a motion submitted by the company's new majority stakeholder, the board had voted to install Jenna Monroe as the new chairwoman of the board of Whitaker Corporation. It was the ultimate reversal of fortune. She was no longer the discarded wife. She was the queen who had taken the castle. Her first act as chairwoman was not one of revenge, but of restoration. She issued a press release, not from the steps of a hospital, but on official company letterhead. It was calm, professional, and decisive. She announced that the manufacturing division, now under her direct control, would be rebranded as the Monroe Manufacturing Group, operating as a core subsidiary of the parent company. She guaranteed all jobs and pensions at the Monroe plants, earning the instant, ferocious loyalty of thousands of employees. She announced she was bringing in a new, respected management team to stabilize the company and that her first priority was to restore shareholder value through ethical and transparent governance. The market responded. With the drama over and a clear, competent leader at the helm, the stock began to crawl back upward. It was a long road back, but the bleeding had stopped. A week later, a single chastened letter arrived for her at the hotel. It was from Ethan. It was a rambling, pathetic plea, full of self-pity and blame. He wrote of his love for her, of Sabrina's poisonous influence, of his deep regret. He begged for a second chance, for a way to put their family back together. Jenna read it once, her expression unreadable. Then she walked over to the desk where Camille was working. She didn't say a word. She simply tore the letter in half, then in quarters, and dropped the pieces into the wastebasket. The past was a ghost. It had no power here. Her gaze fell on her son, cooing in his bassinet. Her world was no longer about a failed romance or a bitter betrayal. It was about him. It was about building a legacy he could be proud of, an empire founded not on arrogance and cruelty, but on the strength and integrity of his great-grandfather, Elijah Monroe. She looked out the window at the city she now held in the palm of her hand. The Whitakers had thought she was just a pretty chapter in their story. They never realized she was the whole book, and she was just getting to the good part. So the story has reached its final page, and yet you're still here, aren't you? That tells me something powerful. Something in Jenna's journey has touched your heart in a way you can't quite ignore. So let's pause, just you and me, and look at it from a different lens. In Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Jenna's story is exactly that. A woman who had no control over betrayal, humiliation, or the timing of her heartbreak. But she chose her response. She chose integrity, clarity, and power over chaos. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming self-worth, about protecting her child's future, about honoring a man who taught her that resilience isn't loud, it's patient, it's planned, and when it finally rises, it shakes the world. So what can we take from her story? That your pain does not define your end. That betrayal can be the forge of a stronger version of you. That sometimes the universe breaks you not to destroy you, but to wake up the part of you that remembers who you are. Epictetus once said, "Difficulties are things that show a person what they are." Jenna didn't just survive the storm, she became the storm. So my dear friends, if you're still watching this, maybe something inside you is stirring too. Maybe you've been underestimated, hurt, or silenced. But like Jenna, you're not done yet. You're just getting to the good part. If her story resonated with you, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to feel seen, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we have more stories coming, each a reminder that no one writes your ending but you.